Well, after the 2018 Parkland school shooting, people wondered how a kid could lash out so violently. Well, Aaron Stark knew exactly how and why, and he penned a powerful letter titled, "I was almost a school shooter." And in it, he writes, "I didn't carry out anything. I didn't hurt anyone. But in 1996, I almost did the worst possible thing. My mental health was in sad shape. I was severely depressed and suicidal. I felt like I had nothing at all in life to look forward to, and so I literally had nothing to lose. But there is one thing that would have made it all different. One thing that, if it was in the equation, would have ended up in terror. I didn't have access to an assault rifle." Well, after his letter gained mass attention, he gave a TEDx talk on the role mental health plays in violent acts.
Love the ones you feel deserve it the least because they need it the most. It'll help you just like as much as it helps them. We're in a really big, dangerous spot right now with this trend of arming the teachers and looking out for the kids who might be the threat in schools and maybe turning them into the FBI. What's that going to do to a kid who's in the position that I was in 25 years ago, who's alone and depressed and abused and is just sitting there hurting, and someone thinks that they're a threat?
Aaron Stark is here with us now. Aaron, thank you for joining the show. You have been very clear. It's not just about the guns. It's not just about mental health. It's about both. What does your personal experience tell us about how to stop future shootings?
I really think that the biggest thing we need to do right now is listen. When I look at these most recent school shootings, especially the one in Uvalde, I was shocked by how similar to my own story it was. I saw what appears to be a path of abuse at home, followed by self-loathing, followed by being bullied, then you become the bully, and then you become the best bully. And along the way, you try your best to express your pain outwardly to everybody else. And looking at his story, I just saw that path that he went down, and it looked like someone who was screaming out to be seen his whole life. And by no means does that excuse the horrible acts that occurred, but I really think that we need to start looking at the people on that edge of that darkness, like we might be able to bring them back and help them, and not just push them further out with more hatred and more alienation.
I was listening to your TED Talk, and you talked about how during that awful time in your life, you felt a comfort in darkness. And I'm wondering, you said in that letter that if you had had access to a rifle, there would have been terror that would have been unleashed.
Yeah.
What were you planning to do, and how did you reach such a point in your life that you were contemplating that?
I grew up in a really painful and violent house, and I internalized that self-hatred early, and I made it my own personality. I was determined to become the best monster possible. And along that way, I reached what I consider rock bottom, and I reached out for help. And when I tried to reach out for help, I went to social services, and that ended up being the most toxic time in my life, when they brought my abuser in with me, and it just it was one of the most negative things that ever happened to me. So I just ran into that darkness, and I embraced it fully. And the only thing that pulled me out of it was being treated like a person when at the time I didn't even feel human. I felt like I was just a ball of destruction waiting to explode. And I had someone who looked through all that and saw me as a person in pain and just a kid crying out for help. And it literally saved my life and changed my whole world. It was the most powerful thing that ever happened to me.
And you felt like, though you were at such a low moment, you felt like, what would it matter if I went and shot up a school or a food court, right? I mean, I think people try to understand. Go ahead.
I wanted to become the best monster. I was raised, told I was worthless, told I was nothing. And when you're told you're worthless enough, you will believe it. And then you do everything you can to make the world agree with you. And that's what I was doing. The targets that I had planned, I was either going to shoot a mall food court or my school food court, but the victims were actually incidental. It wasn't really about the people I would have shot. The victims were actually intended to be my parents, but by making me. I wanted to make them deal with creating me.
Wow.
And I think that if we look at it by, people say these days that people just do this to be for fame, that these school shooters are looking to be famous. I haven't seen anybody in that dark spot that wants to be famous. They want to be seen. I know I spent years thinking, I would literally walk out of a room of friends and ask, did you remember me when I leave? When I'm gone, do you know if I'm here? And I thought that I was nothing. And when I was literally in that spot, I had planned to get a gun, I had planned to commit the atrocity, and then I was looking back now, I didn't know it then, but I was saying goodbye, and I was going and giving away my belongings, and I went to the one true friend I had at the time, and he saw the pain I was in and brought me inside, and just treated me like I was a person, sat me down, had a meal, and had a shower, and it was the most humanizing and cathartic thing. And I really feel like we have a whole generation of people that are crying out for someone to tell them that they're okay and that they're good, and they're finding it in the worst, most toxic places possible. So instead of having that friend that tells them they're going to be okay, they're having the people saying, you're going to be okay, but first that person has to pay. And that's how we end up with things like the Reddit 4chan groups and the incel groups and this whole negative social subculture that we have that seems to be dragging us all down. And in that group, they will reward you for being the best bully. They will teach you how to be the best troll. They'll show you how to be the best, the meanest person, and how to be the best monster. And so you get the positive affirmation you're craving your whole life. You just get it from the worst possible place.
And you were so fortunate to have that friend in your life who showed you acts of kindness, which literally put you on a completely different path. You went on to get married, have 4 kids, and come out and speak about this to try to prevent future shootings. But you raised such an important point. There are still so many others who are out there right now on these 4chan channels and Reddit and so forth talking about this, using the rhetoric you mentioned. The average profile of a mass shooter is typically a young white male. There was a survey from the National Center for Health Statistics that found that of the men who reported daily feelings of anxiety or depression, less than half sought treatment. And you were actually one of the ones that did reach out for help. How do you reach people who aren't looking for help themselves, who feel like it's weak by reaching out for help?
Well, I think breaking that stereotype is very important. I think the concept of act like a man is the most toxic and dangerous thing that happened to men ever. I think that we need to be able to be comfortable talking about our emotions and our feelings and be able to express this publicly. If somehow the image of a big hairy guy like me on stage crying about the pain I went through in life helps someone else talk about their own pain, then keep it going, keep talking, because you never know who might listen. And we, as men, we are taught that the way we should express our emotions when we're hurt is with aggression. We should get angry and we should hurt people. But fundamentally, that pain that we feel, that I felt when I was in my darkest spot, there's really not a difference in that pain than there is in a pain that a model feels when she's in her car outside of a photo shoot when she's throwing up in a cup. Fundamentally, there's no difference there. It looks entirely different to the outside world. We're manifesting our pain in entirely different ways, but at the bottom of it, it's self-loathing and self-deprecation. And that is, the men express our pain with violence. We're taught from an early age that we need to have a stiff upper lip and we can be the strong one, we can be the tough one. Women internalize it and they express their pain with self-loathing and self-destruction and with eating disorders and with beauty disorders. And that I think if we can see that the common thread that we have is that sense of self-loathing, it's sad that might be the one thing that binds us together. But if we can see that it is, then maybe we could start bringing out more emotion in men and giving them a space to talk about these things safely and know that it's actually a lot stronger to talk about these emotions publicly than not. I dare any one of these tough guys that say that it's not manly to talk about this, do what I do once. Get up on stage one time and say what happened in your darkest times in your life. Then you'll see strength.
There is something so liberating and freeing about talking about your emotions, what you have been through, and you have had the courage to do that on a national stage. I'm curious, as you look at all of these mass shootings one after another, do you think the problem is only getting worse, or is there any hope on the horizon in your view?
I think that there is hope because I think that awareness and communication is key. And the more we talk about it, the more we remove the stigma of talking about it, the more that we open up about the feelings of men in pain, the feelings of the how close you can get to that dark and how common it is that people get to that dark spot. There's a very small sliver of people that will actually follow through with an attack. But there's a large gray area of people that think they could, should, or might. And that group of people that think that they're worthless, those are the ones that we can talk to, that they show them that they matter. If you see someone that's in that spot that feels like they're worthless, show them that they matter. Bring them into your fold. Treat them like a friend. The simple friendship is what stopped me from committing a horrible atrocity. And you never know what a simple hello might stop the next person from doing. And kindness is free.
Such a kindness is free. That is so true and so simple to be kind. Aaron Stark, thank you for coming on with that powerful message from your own personal experience. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.